Hi, everybody. It has been a super long time since I've done one of these pandemic makeovers for STEM challenges. So, starting today, I'm going to do some late winter challenges and then kind of get into a Groundhog Day one. So, my plan is today is Snow Scoop, Friday, tomorrow is Frosted Forest, and then next Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I'll do three more Winter Waiter, Functional Furniture, and Groundhog Graffiti. And I'm going to do some pandemic changes to make this work really well for you, even if you're doing social distancing, working in the classroom, or if you're doing distance learning and you don't know what kind of materials your kids have available to you, and you probably have some different time constraints as well. So, without any further ado, I'm actually going to pull up a little bit, just a few slides to keep me on track to make sure I cover all the little ideas I have for you. In general, the main goal of this challenge is to build the best snow scoop, and we'll talk about how to define best, but pretty much we're going to measure this by the single scoop capacity or the time it takes to clear a path. This will make more sense as we go through a little bit further. So, what we're going to talk about is modifications that you can make. And for the most part, the biggest changes that will have to happen because of social distancing or distance learning are going to be on your materials. Obviously, the way that the kids approach building and measuring success of their designs. How do we do collaboration, and how would you have them record and reflect? And I'm also going to share with you how to get the paperless resource of this challenge for free if you're watching this anytime before April 16th. Anytime before April 16th, 2021, you can get this. I'm going to share with you how you can grab the paperless version of this resource for free. And if you're looking for like the normal year walkthrough of this challenge, you're going to find that on my YouTube channel. If you just go to YouTube and search Feel Good Teaching, you'll find the winter and Christmas playlist, and you can see how this challenge would look, like I said, in a normal year. But it is not a normal year, so I'm not gonna, I'm not even gonna worry too much about that right now. So this is typically what I would look for my materials. Now, again, this is something we're going to change because we're not going to make assumptions about what kids have at home if they're distance learning. Um, and I'm also trying to move a little bit away from using food, especially when we know food is really scarce right now for a lot of families. So we're going to talk about some different things you can do. So basically the materials that you're going to need fall into three categories. You need a yard for there to be snow. I will show you a couple different examples of this and ways we could change this up. But what I've used in the past, actually, let me remove this for a second. What I've used in the past is these foil pans, and sometimes I use like the longer ones that are less tall because I usually just go to Dollar Tree and pick up a few of them. Now, if your kids are at home, we're not going to expect them to have that, but I'm going to share with you how I would change this. I just kind of want to give you the overview of what kinds of things we might usually use. Then you're going to need snow, which you might, in the past I've used rice, I've used mini marshmallows. You could use beans or small pasta if you wanted to use food. But you don't have to. You can use junk mail, scrap paper, or if your kids are at home and you're in a cold place, maybe even actual snow. So one of the things that I did was I actually just took my junk mail today, my little ads for the grocery store and all that, and I made snow. Now it looks kind of crazy right now, but what I did is I just basically tore up little sections and I crumpled them into balls. So this is now my yard and my snow. I also challenged myself to see now what if your kids you really don't think they have anything? And I'm gonna share with you how I would introduce that to them and how I would have them look for materials they could use. But I also thought to myself, well, what if I just only used ads? What if I only used what came in the mail in my junk mail? So that's kind of where this is what I would use for the yard then. I just thought it might not look, it might be hard to differentiate if I showed it to you like this. But my yard and my snow are both made of the ad. And in fact, one of my snow scoop examples I'm going to show you later is also made from junk mail. So most everybody's going to have access to junk mail. You could also use scratch paper. Now, if I wanted, obviously that's some dirty looking snow. I could have decided to use the white envelopes, if I had enough of those. So these are just all some different options. In addition to the yard and the snow, you are going to need something they can make a scoop out of. So in the past, when we're in the classroom, I know I can give students access to craft sticks or maybe straws or pipe cleaners. I know I can share with them masking tape. Um, One of my substitutions that many students will have, but again, not everybody. We don't know what everybody's going to have, but address labels. I get unsolicited address labels in the mail all the time. So they could use that in place of tape potentially. Again, I always tell the kids they have to ask permission from their parents. Once they think they know what materials they want to use, they need to get the okay from their parents, make sure it's okay to use. You can use index cards, cardboard scraps, scrap paper, junk mail, scissors are helpful, but you could do this without scissors. You could just do folding and tearing, um, and it would work. Another thing you can, or lots of other options here: foil, binder clips, clothespins, rubber bands, string. It's helpful to have a scale depending on how you're going to measure success. Not everybody has a scale, but some people do have kitchen scales. So we'll talk about that. A timer, depending on how we're measuring success, and maybe an extra bowl for measuring. Okay. Here's what I would do when I would start this challenge if I was doing hybrid or all distance learning. So I would show students metal pan and rice or mini marshmallow snow. And I would show them this and I would say, now, this is what we would usually use, but you're at home right now. So the next time we talk, so I would do this maybe the day before, the time before. Some of you only see your kids once a week. If you can do it this way, tell them this is what I want you to do. I want you to come back tomorrow or next time and give me 3 examples or ideas for something that could be the yard. So in this case, I actually probably wouldn't say snowy yard, but I would say this metal pan is supposed to look like a yard. And this rice that you see inside the yard is meant to be snow. So I want you to come back next time and give me 3 different things that you could use from around your house to build a yard, and then 3 different things you could use to symbolize snow, and start collecting some clean trash to build a snow scoop, and possibly within size constraints. So let's talk about size constraints on all of these things. One thing about these snowballs is if your kids are going to be, if you don't say anything about the size, you might end up with like these gigantic, like baseball size snowballs, which is not what we really want. So you might want to give them something to compare. So a mini marshmallow is a good sort of thing that most kids will have seen and sort of have an idea in their mind about how big a mini marshmallow is. So you can let them know, like, we're looking for things around that size. So they might come back and they don't have to necessarily have them to show on the screen, but they should at least have the idea. So they might say, you know what, my mom's going to let me use these pasta noodles that are pretty small, or I'm allowed to use Cheerios, or I'm going to crumple up little pieces of paper, or I have some marbles, or I have some beads, or whatever. So we want to get lots of different ideas from the kids, regardless of what they might have access to. So, and they can't say something you already showed them. So if you already showed them mini marshmallows and you already showed them rice, they need 3 new ideas. And that's what I would do for the first piece of it. And then let's talk a little bit about the criteria and constraints, and then we'll move into some other things. So the idea is to build an efficient snow scoop that can be operated using only 2 fingers on one hand. And the reason that I do that is because it's just too easy. If you let them use like either their whole hand or both hands, now depending on who your kids are, that might actually be a really good modification, right? Depending on the age of your kids or students who might have special needs, maybe you don't put that constraint in there that it's 2 fingers, or maybe you say you can use 3 fingers, or you can use 2 fingers on each hand. But for example, I was telling you earlier, I was looking at, could we do this whole challenge using only junk mail? And I did use address labels too. So junk mail and address labels, and it is possible. So I was building myself a little snow scoop here using junk mail, and I would operate it using and I count the thumb as a finger. I don't differentiate. So I am just using these, and this is how I would have to scoop. And when I go to run into using it, I struggle a little bit because it's a first design. It's not quite what I would need it to be. Now, one of the things you can do with your kids if you don't see them for very long is you could I always like to have them try to design something first. Because if you show them anything, you show them a picture of a design, they're going to try to rebuild that design instead of thinking of something new. And it kind of stunts their creativity. You probably heard me say that before. But one thing I might do is I might show them something like this, or even have kids show each other. Like maybe they come on and they show, this is my design. This is how I made it. I might ask them, no, tell us about, what did you do and why did you do it? Like, are there any reasons, oh, I put a little reinforcement here because when I picked it up, it was a little floppy. So I wanted to build this piece up. Now, you can have other students predict, they could jot it down or they could say it out loud, like what they think is going to happen when you actually try to test it out for the first time and scoop some snow. And then you can have them even justify it. Why do they predict that it's going to work well or it's not going to work well? And then you have them just test it and then see where they go. So this one is scooping up some snow. Now let's talk about, before we get into, I'm going to put this down, before I get into measurement, because there are lots of different options here. And some of them are more challenging than others based on, what kids might have available to them at home. Some of them are very, very simple. But this is like the simplest version of this challenge is, let me add this back, is just an efficient snow scoop that can be operated using 2 fingers on one hand. A reminder not to show them pictures of examples beforehand because it stunts their creativity. Let's say you want to make this challenge a little bit tougher. You have older students or students who are really more savvy with STEM challenges. So one thing you can do is actually simple. Just have them use the non-dominant hand. So I'm a right-handed person. If I have to operate my snow scoop with my left hand, it is really a lot harder, so much harder than it probably should be. You can really limit their materials. So even if they find a bunch of like clean trash at home that they could use, you might limit the size of what they're allowed to use. So if you're not sure they have rulers at home, you could say something as simple as your material cannot be longer, like your material scraps cannot be longer than your pinky or wider than your pinky, or just choose a finger, but don't choose the middle finger. You'll run into trouble there. And so that's kind of actually what I was looking at, or what I was thinking about when I was looking at this example of my snow scoop, is I was cutting some strips of like my pointer finger. This one is actually longer, but I was thinking about mostly width at that point, because if you let them use like really big sheets of paper, or like if you let them use cardboard, if like they're using a cereal box to build their snow scoop, it's I think that's appropriate for like 2nd grade, maybe 3rd grade, maybe 3rd. It depends. You'll know your kids. You could even give it to them the first, if you think that's what you should do for the first round, do that. But then if you find that they're all like super successful, then challenge them in the 2nd round and say, now this time we can't use cardboard. You can only use paper. It needs to be really flexible material, not rigid at all. I don't know. I lost my train of thought. I'm going to go back to this piece and it'll come to me. Okay. So yeah, you can say, whatever their pieces of materials are, if you want to make it harder on them, more engineering involved, then make it something they really have to construct. That's not like, a paper plate is going to be a lot easier to construct or create into a snow scoop than like strips of paper, right? Because they have to actually manipulate that more or do some engineering with it. So just pick any small common object to use as your, whatever your size constraint is going to be, because you don't know if they have rulers. Or like I said, you can say you can only use junk mail. And then when they're building, I don't constrain the size when they're building the yard. So if they're building, the actual sort of like container for the snow, that can be, whatever size you decide you want it to be. It's a little bit harder to size constrain. You don't want this to be huge because they've got to fill it with snow. So I would tell them, about the size of a piece of notebook paper. If they have notebook paper, great, they can compare it. If they don't, at least they have sort of a visual in their mind of what they think and they can estimate. And then you can also constrain or require certain shapes or angles within their design. So you could say no right angles allowed. That's a good one. That's pretty simple and straightforward. And you could say no edges to the yard. So rather than building a container to put the snow in, if the snow is just loose on a tabletop, it becomes a little bit more challenging to actually scoop up the snow because there's nothing for it to sort of push against. And if you do that, you might want to consider having your design be something where they get 2 fingers on 2 hands, so that they might choose to build something on one side that helps stop up, or like feed, almost like sweep in the snow. Okay. Just press settings and I didn't mean to do that. Okay, moving over here. For your modifications, more modifications for you. Students are obviously going to be working in most places individually because we're still doing social distancing. In a normal year, I would have them in partners. So that's one difference. And your collaboration can come from small group feedback or small group planning. We're going to talk a little bit about that coming up. So we've kind of, what we didn't talk enough about is measurement. So let me come back here. So what I would probably do, what I think is the simplest way to handle this, measurement, knowing if your kids are at, home that they might not have access to a scale, is I would probably look for them to create snowballs out of junk mail, like keep that pretty consistent. And then that way, when they do a single snow scoop capacity, they can dump it out and they can count a couple different options. They can count how many snowballs they got to fit into their snow scoop. Then we have an issue where you could talk with kids, depending on the age, if it makes sense or if you want to complicate it or you don't. Now, if I'm looking at this snowball, it's really not equal to that snowball, right? And your kids are not going to make super consistent snowballs either. So this is a thing where I might even just have this discussion. I might just have this discussion with them because I think this is a good thought exercise. I was testing this snow scoop, and this could be, maybe you built and they've all built too. And then when you come back and you're talking about it, you say, you know what? I was counting the snowballs that I collected, but it doesn't seem very fair to me. It doesn't seem like a very fair test of my snow scoop because, like, look at this snowball and, like, look at that snowball. And what could we do to be more precise? If you're allowed to do breakout rooms, they could go in breakout rooms and discuss. If they do a quick journal, they can do that. They just answer the question, that's fine too, but look for some different ways. So what you might have some students suggest is that it would be more fair test. They might say, oh, well, you should make them all the same size. And so then maybe you come back at them and say, well, yeah, that does make sense, but I don't have a ruler at home to measure it to make sure I'm making them all the same size. So what are some ways I could make sure that I'm being more precise if I don't have a ruler? Again, they break out, they discuss it, they think, pair, share, whatever, however they're doing it. Maybe they're not doing think, pair, share right now. And then, maybe they come up with ideas like, well, even if you don't have you don't have a ruler, you could still fold the paper, fold it in half and fold it in half again and get the squares or rectangles into basically the same size, then cut it, then crumple those up. You're more likely to come up with the same size. You might have some kids, challenge them. Even if somebody comes up with a good answer, see if you can get them to come up with more ideas. Another thing that you might have them do is, instead of counting the snowballs, they could unravel their snowballs. They could kind of piece them together and they could take a rough area measurement all together. What's the area of the snow, if that makes sense? There are lots of different options. And one of the things that I really think we have an opportunity to do when your kids are working at home is to actually spend more time on things that we might not spend time on usually in class and things like that. Just working through the problem solving of, now that I have this snow scoop, what are some really fair ways to test it? And what's the best way to know that this is an effective snow scoop? So maybe you even have them decide before they start measuring, how do you think it makes sense to test if this snow scoop is really effective at its job? What are some fair ways to do that? Okay. I'll answer any questions too. If you guys have questions at the end or want to talk about any piece of this, I'm going to go ahead and move forward, but I know the measurement piece is one that people tend to have a lot of questions on. So let's talk more about collaboration, recording, reflecting, and I will also tell you how to get the paperless version of this challenge for free. I've talked about this before. Flipgrid is a great option. You probably already have your favorites from doing distance learning during the pandemic, but some different ways to think about it is having them share, like create their video of their planned materials. So before they even start building, if you give them that assignment where they're choosing 3 different things they could use to make a yard, 3 different things they could use for snow, and then maybe a collection of clean trash that they might use to put their snow scoop together. So one video could be as simple as them just showing that. And that's very helpful if you're doing asynchronous stuff for students to be able to check in and watch other students' videos, because they might be thinking, I don't have anything I can build with, and then get ideas from their classmates that tell them, oh yeah, actually I do always get those ads from the grocery store and I can go ahead and just use those. or whatever, whatever materials people come up with. Of course, you can have them share their designs. You might even have them work together in a team when they're creating their designs, even if it's like on paper planning or however they've planned their design and they're sharing that before they build. Or you can have them actually get to the point where they build and they share out with their team, this is what I made, this is why I made it, or like why I made certain decisions the way that I did. And they all share, they all give each other feedback, they all talk about how well it performed. And then maybe they even go forward from there and create a unified or a unifying element. So something that they're going to decide is their team's thing. And then they all sort of either modify or build new their snow scoop and do another version. So a common team element or a unified design. And they might even just make videos to ask for help in their designs, like, hey, this is what I made. And here's a problem I ran into. It's like it's a little bit floppy. Like it's not very strong. And so like when I go to scoop up the snow, like I feel like there's plenty of room in this scoop, but I can't get as much snow in it as I want because it just like doesn't, you could even have them show it. And so then maybe they can give feedback. Hey, have you thought about putting a support in on this place? Blah, blah, blah. And then I would ask each member to be responsible for either asking or answering or both. So either asking a question or answering somebody else's question so they're getting feedback. And if you Flipgrid or something like it isn't an option, you can also use things like Google Slides or Padlet, or you probably have your own favorite by now. Okay, I'm going to come back on screen. Oh, I'm off. No, I did that the right way. I was like, am I on screen or off? Okay, so extensions on this, I think I will share this with you so you can see. Lots of different options, but graphing data is a really, really good one. Some kids might want to make multiple snow scoops. Some kids will make just the one, but even doing multiple tests, because, they're not going to just take their snow scoop and scoop one time. They're going to do it like, you can tell them how many times you want them to do it. And then they can graph that data. They could even ask and answer questions with their teammates or with other classmates based on their graphs. Simple machines, obviously, this is, has levers written all over it. States of matter, because we're talking about snow. Weather, because we're talking about snow. And you can repeat the challenge with other types of snow. So instead of using, how would things change if I used, marshmallows instead of this? Or if I used, what else might they have? Marbles. This design will not work with marbles at all. So you can actually compare and contrast, even have them look at each other's designs, because some of the students aren't going to be, unless you've told them they're all going to use crumpled up balls of paper for their snow, there might be a lot of variety in what the students are using. And that would then, there should be variety in the snow scoops that are created to scoop that kind of snow, like especially if they use like real snow. And then you can, from there, if this makes sense with your standards, to me, that lines up with cell specialization, right? Because nerve cells look a lot different from blood cells. And why is that? Because they have a different job. Their function is different. What they're doing is different. So I think that kind of lets you kind of segue into cell specialization and even organelles too, which might not have come to mind immediately. So the paperless version, I wanted to talk about that. The paperless version of this challenge can be helpful for the recording and reflecting piece if your students are hybrid. If they're in class, you might have your own sort of like STEM journals or print stuff you usually go to. There is a print version of this challenge too, and those links are in the description wherever you're watching this. But I'm also giving this away to anybody who registers for Elementary STEMCon and beyond using my link. So you can check out these slides if you want. I'm gonna come back on screen in just a second and answer any questions, and also just let you know where you can find information on all of this. And I think actually, does this block too much? It'll just block the bottom piece. So if you go to this link, bit.ly/STEMCon21, and it's all lowercase, that's the link. If you purchase a registration, and early registration is happening now through the end of January, and then it turns into regular registration. This is a $398 product that is Google Slides, works with Google Slides. And if you want to see like exactly what's inside of this resource, again, if you go to that paperless resource link that's in the description, wherever you're watching this video, you can see more of what's inside. But Elementary STEMCon and Beyond is going to be awesome. If you didn't get to go to it last year, or if right now you're thinking I'm a secondary teacher, so it's not for me, that's what the And Beyond is about. So we're actually adding a lot more secondary content this year. We're adding more STEAM. We're adding more special education, but we've got tons of elementary STEM as well. So when you go to the site, you will see on like all the session descriptions, it has like a grade level tag, and there's even a downloadable guide that has all of the sessions listed by grade level band. So if you're like, well, I'm K2, is this for me? I would go and download the guide, the conference guide that's like halfway down the page. And you can see all of the sessions that apply to K2 in a list, everything for 3-5 in a list, everything for secondary in a list. And there is a ton there. And during early registration, it's only $35.98. So it's like, it's a ridiculous price because I got to set the price, and I always price things lower than they should be because I know we only have so much money, and teachers are always paying for conferences themselves. So I want to make it really affordable whenever we do that. So if you buy with this link, then you also get Snow Scoop for free, the paperless version, and that will help you with the recording and reflecting piece. So I actually don't see any questions about the challenge. So if you are watching the replay of this after the fact and you do have questions or a specific situation that you're wondering about for Snow Scoop or just in general STEM challenges during pandemic, you can just put them right in the comments and then I will come back and answer them. Or you can hop on if you're watching this sort of during the next week. Today is January 14th. So Friday and then Monday through Wednesday of next week, I will be doing more pandemic makeovers for late winter challenges. Okay, I will talk to you soon. Have a wonderful evening. Goodbye for now.